suffered quite so much.
Sorry, I forgot to record. I want to make sure we get all this. Go ahead.
Okay, I wouldn't have suffered quite so much. I would have said to myself, come on, girl, you're Brazilian, put your big girl knickers on and do something about it. Once you know all the pieces and the parts of you, once you understand all the hidden assets that you have within you, like an archaeological dig, you can use them. And I came to that, it took me a while. I've been working with clients for 22, 23 years. And once it took me until about 3 years ago to realize that's a piece that was missing. So once you realize that there's more to you than that, and I got it, once I got it, and I thought, well, how do I write about that? How do I impart that and help people find those hidden pieces? I started to write down all the different ways that I knew of personally that would help people find their hidden pieces, if you like. And of course, I've made some crib notes here because I knew I wouldn't remember everything. So I knew, of course, about past life regression. I'd studied that under Henry Bolduc and Into Life with Michael Newton. I also knew about boundaries, value system. I knew about marketing. I knew about couples. Because I'd studied that in Gestalt therapies, a lot of things I had studied, but they didn't give me what I wanted. So I started to think of the other things that made sense and how we could find more about ourselves, including some of the ancient arts, as well as the more modern ones. So some of the practices included astrology. I sort of kind of know about it, but don't really know enough to write about it. Spirit guides, absolutely, I know about it, especially in the gardens. You know, we have these elementals, and I don't know about you, but I talk to mine when I go into the woods, but I don't know enough to write about them. And the birth order. Birth order is a more modern understanding of how birth order affects us. And I used it when I ran a large company to hire people. I used the birth order, but I didn't have the scientific background or the knowledge to write about it. But I thought it should be on the list. And thanks to Carl Jung, we understand what archetypes can do for us. They bring up the pieces of us. But again, I'm not a Jungian therapist, so didn't feel qualified to write about it. And the same with Akashic records. And although I see auras, I don't know what the colors mean. I just see their depth and their strength. So I couldn't write about them. I don't have that expertise. And angels, well, certainly not an expert on that. And I do understand light and dark, but how do I write about that with integrity? Because I think if you're going to write something, you have to be an expert, and you have to have the depth as well as the breadth and the knowledge to write about it, because you're imparting knowledge and people believe what they read. Also, I knew numerology was important, but I've never been a person for numbers. In fact, I'm so bad with numbers that I see them as shapes. I don't see them as numbers. And when I ran this large company that I was talking about, we had a controller who used to go crazy with me because he'd give me spreadsheets and I wouldn't know what the heck he was talking about. And after a while, we both decided it would be better if he gave me the figures in a diagram. So he used to give me graphs. So if I had to go to head office and present my figures, I'd hold up the graphs and everybody would think I was really innovative and creative, because I didn't just present figures, I presented the picture of what was happening with the company. And they thought that was very clever. They didn't know I was covering up part of me that didn't understand or really read numbers very well. So all of this was like surface information and isn't enough to write a book. And I certainly wouldn't call myself an expert in any of these areas. And then I figured that there's more than that. There are many more ways of finding out more about ourselves. And I started to read and research and added to the list numerology, working with dreams. I mean, that's powerful work, but it doesn't fit. I just don't know where to start with that one. There's emotional intelligence and creativity. Creativity is a funny one because I assume that everybody's creative. And when people say they're not creative, I show them how they are. But I didn't know there were 3 levels of creativity. I had no idea until I spoke to, the name's gone out of my head, she's a friend of mine, Leanne McAleer. Until I spoke to Leanne, I had no idea that there were 3 levels of creativity. And that was fascinating. So that got on the list. And then there's family constellations. I know about birth order, but I know nothing about family constellations. I'd heard about it and knew how important it was in growth and understanding of self, but it never occurred to me to study it because it didn't attract me. So I knew I needed to get an expert on that. I also was fascinated by animal guides. And I know that mine is an elephant, which was a surprise to me, because if someone had asked me a year ago or 2 years ago, what's your animal guide? I'd have said, oh, a jaguar or a leopard or an eagle, you know, something that soared and had presence. When it came right down to it, mine turned out to be an elephant. Long memory, solid, dependable, reliable, matriarchal. It's really funny. So it fits so perfectly. And when I found out, I went, yes, but I don't know enough to help other people find their animal guide. What else? Face reading. It's ancient Chinese modality that has been brought up to date through science and understanding. Many government departments use face reading when they're trying to see if people are telling the truth or not. Also, as Holly was talking about the angels, I sort of know angels and I have my guardian angel, but can I talk to people about how to find their angels and communicate with them? No, I don't have that expertise. So again, I had to find people who really knew what they were talking about and how to write about it. And for sure, Crystal Pomeroy does a fantastic job. Enneagrams, well, here we go again. Enneagrams is also numbers. It's supposedly powerful, and it supposedly really helps with personality traits. But I had no idea how to work it. I look at that wheel with the numbers on it and I go, ugh. So I definitely needed someone about that. And I know a lot of people who use it and believe in it. So finally, hand reading. Now, I knew a little bit about hand reading because growing up in England, we used to go to tea rooms. And there was always a tea lady that would swirl the tea, turn the cup upside down and read the tea leaves. And we all thought that was magic, but she had something special. But then she would read a palm, your palm reading. You're supposed, supposed to cross your palm with silver. And I knew it was fascinating, and I knew it had to have something there. And it's not a modern modality. It goes way, way back. And fortunately, our wonderful guest, Lisa Greenfield, will be able to talk about it. So I invited her to be part of this talk today. But before we get to Lisa, let me just finish about the book. I did my research not only for the people who had expertise in the modality itself, but people who could write in an engaging way. They had to be interesting. They couldn't be documentary. They had to engage the reader. And I also wanted them to invite the reader to practice some of what they learned in the chapter at the end of each chapter. And then at the end of the book, we bring the whole thing together and they can introduce themselves to the new self that they discovered, which is sort of fun. So it really is like an archaeological dig. It had to be fun, easy to read, and accessible. They had to want to get into it. And my thought was, wouldn't it be extraordinary if we had all these people in one place? Imagine having all these experts, all these warm, loving, because you can't do this work without being a loving person, warm, loving, kind people in one place that is willing to share their knowledge and expertise. What a gift that would be to anyone that could participate in that. So I went out and did my research and started looking at all sorts of books. Be surprised how many are pretty dry. People know their subject, but the way they write it is pretty dry quite often. So I was looking for people who could write and bring light and fun and interest so that it nurtured that inquiry part of you. So when you're reading, part of you goes, and what else? And what's next? And what else? And keep doing that. And I found this collection of authors. And I'm very proud of this collection of authors. And I contacted each one and asked if they would like to be part of this, explained what I was looking for. Would they be prepared to fit into the format? And they all said yes. And they all contributed, including the piece at the end of each chapter that said, this is how you can learn to do what I do. This is how you can learn more about yourself. And if you need more information, contact me. And, you know, that's sort of a given. We hope that people do. And then when I was speaking to Lisa, I said, so Lisa, you know, as you know, it's COVID, everybody's on Zoom. I mean, how can you read hands on Zoom? She said, I do it all the time. Lisa's from LA. And as you know, LA is full of people from the entertainment industry. And her roster of clients is full of names that you will recognize that she won't even mention. Or she may, I don't know. But it's full of names that you will recognize. And she's been doing this successfully for many years. She also writes in an engaging way. And in her chapter, she's drawn diagrams. Those of you who have the book, she's drawn diagrams of palms and how you can read your own hand. And with pleasure, I want to introduce Lisa Greenfield to you. Ta-da, Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Georgina. You know that anytime I get to play and you're part of it, I'm a yes. So she reminds me, I don't know if you guys knew about the old train stations where they would have a roundhouse where all the different trains would come in. And based on the switch, they would, you know, there was like 20 different places that they could come in and then they could go out in a different direction. And it's like you were never set. But she reminds me of somebody who's running the roundhouse. The information comes in and it goes out in a new direction, you know, and it's just like, woohoo. Yes, yes. And it's been a joy and a privilege to play with one of my favorite subjects, which is hands. And yes, there are some names I can drop and some that I had to sign NDAs that I can't discuss. What's funny about that is it's mostly the men that don't want their names discussed in public, but they're the ones who will be the first to consult an intuitive. Because in old days, the kings knew that they had their own astrologer and they had their own, you know, magi, you know, but in today's modern world, they're a little less comfortable letting that be known. But one of the things that I love about it and love sharing is that when you learn more information, like that's one of the things I was so excited about the book. When you learn more about yourself, when you change your mind, you actually change the lines. The lines in your hand are a reflection of what you're thinking, feeling, and acting on. And so when you think, feel, and act on something at least 21 times in a new way, you actually send the blood flow and the electricity down a new little neural path. So this is not set in stone. Even the shape of your hands can change. As there was one producer, he had been involved in that duck dynasty, I think it was.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like one of the biggest. He had another project. He was mired down in a horrible legal thing because they wanted the money from Duck Dynasty. They were trying to go after him. But he was so stressed, and we worked with a breathing exercise, because when your little finger sits lower, a lot lower than the other fingers, you're under stress. It corresponds with that tendon on the outside of your hand, and women tend to have it more than men because we have more of a global awareness. That's the fight, flight, or freeze. So the breathing exercise that we did, he texted me about 5 weeks later a picture of his hands, and he said, I was skeptical. He goes, but my fingers actually moved up. And I went, yeah, this is brain biology, So I started out a brain geek. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon because I didn't understand why you could cut the nerves on your finger and they could regenerate, but you cut the nerves in your spine and they didn't. And so it's like, there should be a way to figure that out. But I also wound up being the equivalent of dyslexic in math. So medicine was spared. But it sent me on a lifelong quest, to see the links. When I found out palmistry linked with neurobiology, it's like, oh, I was, a kid at the toy store at that point. And so what I was able to do, because I also had some health challenges, that's why I could recognize resilience in your hands, Georgie.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, when you've got your challenges, the only thing I would say, though, your hands, the different places where your heart line, which is the top line on a hand for a reason, it corresponds with our emotional setting. It's that top horizontal line, and it ends usually under the middle finger, either curved up towards the finger or lower down, or under the first finger. Sometimes, some people really wanted to pull from both, so they wound up right smack in the middle. But based on where it's set, that corresponds with a neurobiological setting. And in your case, where your hands are, Georgina, you were at the time, yes, exactly. Yours highlighted individuation. So you can be a little bit hard on yourself, or a lot hard on yourself, and those emotions may still it's like what you went through is very challenging. And resilience is not about ignoring the pain. It's about being able to hold the truth of the pain and still create with it, rather than being at the mercy of it. And that's something that it's like, sometimes it just takes people learning that you have that ability. Because if you've got a short, straight heart line and it ends under the middle finger and it doesn't curl up, it kind of ends somewhere right here in the center of your hand. It doesn't relate to an edge anywhere. Very often that correlates with the neurobiology of neglect. And here's the thing, it doesn't even have to be, it can be benign neglect. It doesn't have to be traumatic. One woman that I worked with, both of her parents were very high powered, had big careers. She was their adored only child. But the thing is, they expected her to enter their world. They never really sat down and got on the floor and played with her. So she spoke at 10 months old because otherwise she wasn't going to connect, this kind of thing. But she had the neurobiology. She had an incredible mind line, one of the furthest it could go. But her heart line, that top line, what the emotional needs are, and that's the thing that can drive the engine. That's the place where it helps when you understand what your setting is, because remember, we go back to, you can change your mind and change the line. With a little bit of support for your emotional state, Georgina, you've got the tipping into the fire heart, which is the visionary explorer. The furthest the heart line can go is ending up near, not just at the finger, but in that top little quadrant up under the pointer finger. That's my Christopher Columbus's, without the genocide, please. But it's like when everybody's going, yeah, exactly. When everybody was going right to get to the East Indies, my fire hearts go, what if we go left? There's a sense and a pull that there's something else out here. We don't have a lived experience of it. It's intuitive. It's not logical. And here's the third and the kick in the pants for the visionary explorers. It's not going to turn out the way you think it is. He didn't discover the shortcut to the East Indies. So if all he measured himself by is whether he achieved the objective, he missed the point. He thought he was a failure. But it took time and other people. We measure the modern world by that mistake, right? So the visionary explorers, that furthest, you're the ones who are capable of going beyond the lived experience, but it can be very scary for the people around you. Mm-hmm. Which, if it's a low and straight heart line where it goes past that middle point and over under that first finger, but it stays down low, you're the connector. That's the feeling placement for the feeling line. And you're so good at gathering everybody up and carrying things along, and water has the ability to wear down a rock. You would never look at the two and think that water was stronger than a rock. And yet, given time, that water heart has the ability to persuade people to open up to different possibilities. So then it becomes how you work on that middle, the one that we started with Georgina, that curving up but staying under that middle. That's that individuation. That's that place where less feeling, more talking, and our mind sorts and labels things. We know hot because there's cold. We know day because there's night. So it separates rather than connects. The water heart connects, the mind separates and labels, and then that earth heart is the one that feels its way. So it's like we go into more of that in the book. And then all of that takes place also with your mind line. Then we get into the coping skills that wrap around that emotional conditioning. Yeah. Questions so far, or have I left anybody batting their eyes and going, huh?
Well, I'm totally curious because each one of I don't know which hand is preferable to look at. That's my first question. And then my second question is, each one of them, either side is like what am I trying? It's the trident. It's like it's got a trident. It goes in 3 different directions. What the heck does that mean?
You lucky girl, you. All right, first, the left hand has to do with the functions of the brain that are primarily global. They're not a beginning, a middle, and an end. Things like facial recognition, and it's an intuitive, we call it the feminine, the receptive. You're taking things in from a 360-degree view. So the left hand is the starting point, and the right hand is task specific. It's those functions in the brain that can screen everything out and go for a goal. So we tend to see this as more of the masculine. Some people like to say this is the past and this is the future. I'm not as comfortable with that because I don't think time is linear, but that's just me,
No,
so
it's not just you.
Yeah, well, the thing is, everything you do today gives you a chance to understand what happened in the past, in a different framework, and your understanding actually changes the past, so it's like, it's all in flow. This is that global, this is that task specific. When you've got multiple settings, it's no different than if you got into in the old days, you had the radio and you had your 3 separate dials. You've got choice. You move more easily between the different functions. And so you're almost chameleon-like. One of my high school sweethearts, he said, "You're the Coca-Cola kid. You just kind of fit in anywhere you go." And it's like, well, you just, there's multiple options, So you've got that. When you've got multiple settings, you've got more than one emotional style, and you can choose the style that suits the occasion. Does that make sense? Yeah. Other questions? I thought there was somebody else who
Kiki had a question.
You answered it by answering her question.
Fabulous.
Okay. Great.
I love 2 for 1, particularly when time is tight. So yes. One of the things I love most, and there's so much rich information in the book, which is why I was happy to come and support this. when Georgina told me about this, I actually put together a class because it's been a little while. I haven't had a class since before we did the book. And I thought, ooh, what a great way to share with people. So there's going to be a class where if you are interested in learning conflict styles, okay, like a short, straight heart line, this is more of somebody who can stonewall because you just feel overwhelmed. So this is the withdrawal. They even call this, in some books, they'll call it the hermit heart line, because it's just like you're on overload. Your feelings were neglected. You don't know how to show up for a conversation until you understand what it is that you think, feel, want, need. So you need to retreat in order to do that. You know, that's that short, straight. But I saw this with two executives, you know, it was their sisters that ran a company. One had the short straight and the other had the fire heart, the furthest you could go. She, of course, was a CEO, whereas the earth heart was the COO. And she would get so frustrated because she couldn't get her sister to confront her. And I showed them the difference in their hand line. And it's just like, you have to give her a pause and let her go figure it out. And she will come back to you. She goes, she's not just doing that to piss me off. And it's like, no, you know, siblings. And it's like, no, she's really not. She can't function the same way you do. When your heart line curves up towards the fingers, it actually brings down your anxiety to be able to talk things out. But when it stays lower and straight, it correlates with the part of the brain that you need to process on your own time before you understand what you feel. And so it can bring up your anxiety to have to talk about it before you understand what's going on with you. And there's versions of that go on with the mind line, you know, but again, task specific and global. And so we're going to learn how, it's a 2-hour class, we're going to learn how to put it together. And I wanted to make it really easy. So it's under $100. But if you decide that you want to gift some of your hard to shop for people the book, anybody who gifts them, you know, gives 3 books, purchases 3 books, you send me proof of purchase and you have it buy one, get one free. So 2 of you get, I think the class is $79 for 2 hours, and you walk away with a clear strategy on how to deal with conflict. And that's in any hand.
That's
You know,
pretty good. That's amazing, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Lisa, I have a question. This is Chris.
yes, Chris.
Would we need any previous knowledge of palmistry or
Nope.
anything to attend your class?
Nope. I will give you some diagrams that you can look at before you come to the class, because I've got it mapped out. I've been doing it. I've been reading hand since I was 13 years old, but I've only done it for a professional job for about 15 years. I was in the corporate world for 27 years.
Oh gosh, weren't we all?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, for 12 years, I worked, my clients were almost all HR, which was great because then we got to study all these different things, you know. It's like anything you can do to understand the people that you're managing. But no, you don't need any prior knowledge. And my interest, yes, there you go. That's in the book.
That's the sort of diagram that is given to you, and it's very straightforward. It's very easy to follow. It's
Mhm.
not complex. Yeah.
Yep. And the ones I'm going to send you are the ones for the headline, because the ones that are for the heartline are in the book. But it's like, you'll also have the headlines for the same thing for the headline. So your heart is that literally what we feel about something, and our head is what we think, what we say or do about it. And it's that combination that's so potent, you know. And it's like, but again, when you think, feel, and act on something in a new way. So the idea is to give people tools. I'm all about bringing down conflict. You know, I really don't think the world is in as dire states as the news seems to make it, because there's a lot of people who agree on what we want, just not necessarily on how to get there. So it's like, oh, if we can have a more meaningful dialogue about that, I think that there's a lot of, you know, individual conversations that can contribute to that Margaret Mead 5%. You know, it only takes 5% of the population to change direction. And that's why she said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So this,
Lisa, can we make you king for a year or two? And change the world for us.
you know, as long as I get to talk to groups like this, I want everybody to be king of their space, because all of us little 5% kings doing things that direction, I do think it makes a difference. I absolutely do. So you guys showing up, you know, Georgina doing the book, you're part of the 5%. So yeah. But questions, I don't know how much time we have, so I don't know how much time to look at everybody's hand.
Another 5 minutes or so. Yeah.
But I was trying to give you as much.
Mhm.
If your heart line reaches an edge, okay, so you've got the middle finger edge, which is the air heart, the first finger, which is the fire heart, the outside edge on the side, which is the water heart, okay? And then that earth heart is the one right there in the middle. So you've got earth and water are staying low and straight, which tends to make sense. And then air and fire rise up, right? But it's like earth is more of our sensing function, is our sweet spot. We're strong in the body. We need to pay attention to what the body is telling us and slow down long enough to hear it. With the water heart, you need to be aware that it can, what your cycle is, because a wave comes in and a wave goes out. It takes a little bit of time before you know whether the tide is in or the tide is out. No, you know, because the emotions will rise and fall, right? With that air heart, you can always see that big 10,000-foot view. You're like my air traffic controllers, but you need to remember to occasionally get on a plane and let somebody else keep everybody else safe. Okay. You know, it's like, and be really let yourself feel, you know, some of the pressure that you're under to get it all right. And with my fire hearts now, you as my visionary explorer, you get an extra task, because fire is here to serve. And because so much of what you intuit is not going to turn out the way you think it is. I mean, it's not an exact match. It's bigger. It's going to take time and other people. So fire needs fuel. And that's praise, applause, recognition, and respect. Okay, so at the very least, give that to yourself. I'm a big fan of something I call toothbrush love. While you're brushing your teeth, think of at least one compliment a day. When you're done, rinse, spit, look yourself in the mirror, see it, say it, hear it. It helps you refuel. Yeah.
What a lovely thing to do. Yeah, that's a lovely thing for you to tell us. Thank you.
Absolutely. We want to counter program, because there's enough of the negative chatter, particularly for females. Just one last little fact, and then I'll let you guys go. I was absolutely delighted and horrified at the same time to find out if they were trying to figure out how to sell us more things. So they wired up men and women on opposite sides of stock transactions, and the frontal lobe lit up the same bright red when they were making the decision, and then they make the decision and all the little synapses cool off. But women have a secondary system that lights up as soon as the frontal lobe that made the decision cools off. The secondary kicks in, and it's like a pinball, literally like a pinball, you know, was going. Did I buy too high? Did I buy too low? Did I screw them? Did I screw me? Did I make a good choice? All of these little things, and they're just going, wait, what? So women have a secondary system for processing things that come in. That's back to that global, right, that men don't have. So this is one of those where it's like, again, the more you understand how to work with, this is just like an EEG to me. You know, I can't necessarily read an EEG in a doctor's office, but that's what this is. So it's like the more you know how you're functioning, the more you can direct what you think, what you feel, what you do in a manner that actually opens up your world safely. So hopefully you get to play, not just with your hands, but with anything that draws you. Trust that heart. And there's so many things. It's like the poo-poo platter in the book. So yes, but thank you, Georgina. And thank you, Holly, for having us on.
You're extraordinary, lady. Extraordinary. And your knowledge is so deep and wide and thorough and heartfelt and freely given. Thank you. I can't believe there are not more questions. I think you probably answered. Yes. Oh, Susan, here we go.
Where do we get the information to contact you for your class?
Truthinhand.com. I'll drop it in the chat.
Yeah, drop it in chat, please.
Yeah, and you can.
Truthinhand.com.
Yes, and you can just there's a couple different places that you can drop me a line there, and you can just say you're interested in the conflict on hand class, and I'll get you those details. And I'm going to cap it at 10. If it's more than 10, we'll roll to a second night, because I like those classes small, so you can really chew through, what's going on for you. Yeah.
Susan, do you have any questions?
Which Susan are you addressing?
Hmm?
Susan Lyons?
I just wondered if you had any questions. Susan.
Well, I do. I may have missed it, Lisa, but did you talk about where, what the source is or source of your understanding of palmistry is from? I know very little about it, but I know that there's a lot from the Vedic and Indian side of things, but it almost sounds like you're getting like neurologically modern science-based stuff too, maybe.
Well, what I did is I started when I was 13 years old, and this coming year, that will be 50 years that I've been studying it. So I've studied the Eastern, both the Chinese and the Indian, and Chinese is highly correlated with medicine. Indian is as well, but it's not as well documented there. It's taught orally. So I took both of those, but then I also have always been a brain geek. I've got multiple, studies along I'm on the neurobiology email conference list. And so I take what they're teaching and map it out, and I get to play a little bit with it, because I've had such an extraordinary opportunity. I wasn't doing it to make a living for so long that I was able to test out the theories. It's like my version of, okay, I want to know. I don't want to just hear that it does this like really fast. I got to do the stunt Emmys, and Mars, your headline tells you what your risk assessment is. And so I took what I learned about the risk in palmistry, what I knew about the neurobiology, and I said, I had 14 people. I said, don't say anything. Don't tell me anything. I want to see who's what on risk. The second guy in was Big Dave. He was 6'7", and he was this wall of human, not an ounce of fat on him. And I looked at him and went, that's interesting. I'm going, you're not a risk taker. In fact, you have more of an architect's headline. And I went all the way, because I told them, don't say anything, don't get anything in a way. Went all the way around the last person. I looked at her and I went, oh my gosh, I got goosebumps. I go, I'm not getting in anything you drive. Okay. And everybody at that point fell out. Turns out she was the stunt double for Tom Cruise on 2 Mission Impossible movies, because she would do stunts nobody else would do. And Big Dave was a civil engineer, and he was the stunt supervisor. So I've tested these different things against, because again, I'm teaching it. I want to know that it's real. So does that answer the question, Susan?
Yeah, it sure does. Fascinating.
Yeah.
I have another question, Lisa, kind of on the same lines there. Someone had mentioned, maybe Holly mentioned, that you have abilities, psychic abilities that you can tune into. How much of that do you use when you're analyzing the palms?
I actually, I come from a long line of seers, and mostly it was the men in the family, interestingly enough. But I started studying these things because it helped me map what I see, because I didn't have a frame of reference to understand what I saw. So that's why I was attracted to the different modalities. It's no different. I love maps. To me, they're like maps. So it's like, oh, this is a way to actually take what I sense and map it.
I see. Okay, so there's hope for us that if we don't have that psychic ability to, really honed, we could still learn about the palms. And
first of all, I think almost everybody does. They've proven it. This is another brain study up at Berkeley, that there's a significant portion of people that have it. It's just more, it's a shorter lag, it's more instantaneously, and it has to do with survival. People with a longer lead time, so they can sense things in ahead a little bit longer, those are the ones who get tagged psychic. Okay, but everybody has it. It's part of survival. And then it's just about finding the right path forward for you to support how it comes in for you. Mostly we think we're not psychic because we're looking at somebody else and going, well, I can't do that. It's like, that doesn't mean you aren't psychic. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Tanya, do you have a question? No?
We've run the clock out. My apologies.
And no, you're just fine. You're just fine. No questions? Oh, I'm full up. This is just beautiful. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Georgina and Lisa.
Thank you both. Excellent.
That
Excellent.
was just delightful, Lisa. And this is what you ask for when you ask for experts to contribute to your vision. Just that, just sitting right there, that heart, that knowledge, that depth, that understanding. It's not surface stuff. It's not just gobbled information that's coming out the mouth. It's heartfelt. It is meant for the highest good, but it has a solid base, and that is what I find most attractive.
And Georgina, it's birthed through your visionary capacity.
Thank you, Holly. I was just about to say that I've been invited to participate on other books, and I have said no. Georgina was the secret ingredient, because I also know one of the other people that, the astrologer, Kathy, who contributed. And it's like, she is first rate, high quality. She's one of my astrologers. So it's like, we need,
Kathy, yeah.
because we don't ever have perspective for ourselves. So it's like, oh, I trust Kathy. So you pulled us in. So thank you for that. We're a reflection of your vibration.
Oh, that's good to hear. I just want to share it with people that need it, and I think that we all need to find out all that pieces that we don't know we have. That's what this book is about.
And do share with them your interview on Gaia, because I personally thought she held her own. She was so good with George Norrie. I mean, she was so good. I just was sitting there in awe. It's like, oh, good job. Yeah.
No, even the producer was surprised that I got him chatting, because normally he doesn't chat. I don't know if you know this. This is behind the scenes secret, but sometimes he's so bored with all of his interviews, he's listening to sportscasts on his earpiece while he's doing his interviews, because he's been doing it for so many years. And the questions are fed to him that he just, but I almost got him singing. Did you see? Almost. Yes, it was so much fun.
I'm going, now that's an expert. Hollywood loves you. Oh, and by the just one quick little invitation, if you guys are putting together a book, I do have resources here that it's a pay to play, it's a gifting suite that they do for the different events like Golden Globes, Emmys, Grammys, where you your book, and you can take photos with the celebrities. She gives me a deal because I've been working with her for so long and I've referred so many good people. But if you want that, you just let me know. I'm more than happy to put good resources in the suite. And those are well trafficked. She gets A-list media and A-list celebrities. So
Fantastic.
And before we close, can you drop a few names?
Dustin Hoffman was one of the most fun, I have to say. He shut down the filming on Wag the Dog for 2 hours, and the poor producer, they shot that whole thing in 28 days. So 2 hours of production was probably like $300,000. I'm not kidding. And he was having so much fun because when I read his hands, he goes, oh, and then he drags me around and he has me reading everybody's hands. Robert De Niro, who goes like this, it's like Robert De Niro didn't want anyone looking at his hands, So, and that's funny because that's the same thing that happened with Dan Aykroyd. I was at his house and I got to read his wife and his kids and his parents and family friends, and Dan Aykroyd sat there like this. He didn't want me to even see it from across the room. Yeah. There's some really fun people. Yeah.
Well, bless your wonderful heart, and thank you everybody for joining us today. That was lovely.
Georgina, before we go, can you give us a link or information about how we can watch your Gaia?
Yes,
you need to contact me, Georgina, at Georgina Cannon, and I will send you the link which is a free trial for Gaia, and it'll be on there. Georgina at georginacannon.com. Do you want me to put it in chat? Would it be easier?
I think everybody's got it. Georgina
Oh, okay.
at georginacannon.com.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend it because it's like, that was masterful. And I work in a town where broadcasting is done all the time. And it's like, that was masterful. So,
Yeah.
And Virginia, you could remember to put that in our next newsletter for all of our members, if you would, please.
Yeah.
To share. Thank you, goddesses. Appreciate you both so much.
appreciate it. Take care. Happy
Hope to
holidays.
see you guys at the solstice on the 21st.
Okay.
Bring
Thank you,
something to
Lisa.
share.
Chat soon, Lisa.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Everybody
Bye.
take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Georgina. That was fabulous.
Yeah, she's a joy, isn't she?
You were too. You're a
Oh,
joy too.
Thank you.
Bubbly joy. Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you.